Yes, I have loved you with an everlasting love, an everlasting love, an everlasting love. Therefore, with loving kindness have I drawn you, drawn you, drawn you.
Okay, we're going.
Hello, this is episode 31, and it's entitled LGBTQIA Plus Part 2. So, we had started a few weeks ago our first episode in this particular series that we were starting. And we just named it after the acronym. And we did part 1, which was about preparing for Pride Month, which of course is coming up in June. But then, as I mentioned, we had to skip a few weeks because we had some other things going on. But we're ready to pick up now to continue this series and try to answer some questions and kind of put our minds together about why we celebrate Pride Week, Pride Month, and why it's important to be supportive of others in that category, because people aren't being treated right at all. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and I'm wearing a new shirt that I have.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go ahead and have Chastity try to read this to you. So she can see what all it says.
Be the reason someone feels welcome, seen, heard, valued, loved, and supported.
Did you say that loud enough so they could hear it?
I don't know. I was having a hard time reading because it's all wrinkled up anyway.
Okay. Try one more time and speak up a little more.
Okay. Be the reason someone feels welcomed, seen, heard, valued, loved, and supported.
Okay. Well, the reason I got this shirt, I think that's very important for us with Pride Month. Because that's the whole idea, is we need to support people that are being rejected by the whole society, and let them know they're important. And whether you understand or agree with everything that's going on with them, we need to let them know they're people and they're loved, and that God loves them and we love them. And so this is really important that we celebrate Pride Month and that we get a head start like we have, because we don't even know how long this series is going to go that we're doing. Now, we've been doing our podcasts and we've been talking about a lot of different subjects, but right now we feel like God wanted us to focus on Pride Month before it even gets here, and then we'll probably go all the way through June, and who knows, longer if we need to, because I had said too that I wanted to go over some important scriptures that we hadn't really gone over much to help clarify the meaning of things that people are always using against the LGBT community. And so we're ready to move on. And this part 2 of this series is called Attitudes About Gender in the Book of Genesis. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about, first of all, a couple things in the first couple chapters of Genesis that talk about men and women and things like that. And these are important scriptures because these are ones that are also used a lot by people who are against the LGBT community and who want to condemn them and say, oh, you're just evil, and it says here this and that. And I mentioned this before. There's a few of these things I've mentioned before, but we're going to go into more depth. One of the things they say a lot is, well, God made male or female. You're one or the other. But in Genesis 1:26 through 28, let me read what it actually says. I'm going to have to keep my notes right there so I don't lose them. So I know, of course, the book of Genesis is the book of beginnings, origins in the Bible, and so there's a lot talked about them. I may just have to set these notes aside while I just look things up because I can't hold them in there. Okay, so we're talking about Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 28. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God made man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. Notice it said male and female. He didn't say male or female. Mm-hmm. So he did make male and female.
And it's implied that male and female are both in the image of God there.
Right, and then it also says, and God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. Notice it said God blessed them, and said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and basically telling them, I've given you both dominion together. And so in God's eyes, male and female were equal in value, and he gave them both dominion, and they were both meant to work together and partnership and rule over the earth. And so there wasn't an attitude back then about anybody being inferior, the man or the woman. However, not long afterwards, when sin came into the earth, that's when things began to change. And so then, in Genesis 3:16 through 19, we read about what's called the curse. And basically, I believe that this curse, he addressed the man and the woman both, and mentioned some of the suffering they would go through and how hard their lives would be because of sin being in the earth. And so I'll go ahead and read that part, and then we'll talk about that a little bit more. Okay, Genesis 3:16 through 19 says, unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and the desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. And then let's see, And unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it, cursed is the ground for thy sake, in sorrow thou shalt eat of it all the days of thy life. And then it says, thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herbs of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground, for out of it wast thou taken, and for dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return. So, the curse, I don't see it so much as a punishment as a prediction of the consequences of sin. The earth would not yield the crops as easily. Women's bodies would not have as easy pregnancies and deliveries. Men would try to dominate over women. That's why it said he will rule over you. And I shared this before, but I have seen books by men, of course, saying that meant that men were meant to rule over the woman. But since this is part of a curse, all these things are bad things. So I believe it was just predicting. Now, here's what's going to happen. Attitudes, this was the big, men would try to dominate over women, the beginning of sexism. Attitudes of male superiority based on physical strength, and women became property. So, all throughout the ancient times, through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, for a long time, and through most of the Old Testament, and it took till Jesus came and tried to change things, and then Paul finally said, you're neither male or female, basically saying you're equal. But all those years, it was assumed that women were simply property of men, and they didn't matter as much. And also in Genesis 4, that's when polygamy started, where it talks about this man named Lamech that had 2 wives and bragged to them about how he killed somebody, and and it just went on and on and on. And then many, many times it was accepted that men could be married to more than one woman because it was a sign of wealth to own property, to own, and so if the number of cattle you have shows how rich you are, well, then the more wives, the better too, because that's property too. So this was the attitude toward women on the whole. But you'll notice through all the ages, during the time when it was accepted for there to be polygamy, it was always a man owning other wives. It was never a woman who had extra husbands.
Well, and also they had to buy their wives from their father who owned them until they were bought by some man who became their husband.
Right, and and so the daughters were considered property of the fathers, and then the man, if he wanted to marry her, he had to buy her from the father. So she never was her own person. She was always, a property of some man. And then later on we'll get more into the laws, in Leviticus, where there were more rights for the man. And then God eventually taught him more and more to be more fair to the women. But this was kind of the way things went from then on. And to some extent, even today, all over the world, there's that problem to one degree or another, where women are considered inferior, and that's going to lead into some things that have to do with sexuality as well. So anyway, so did you want to say more about that?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, what I'm going to do now, the next topic we're going to get into is a scripture that constantly comes up to condemn homosexuality, and this is also in the book of Genesis in chapter 19. But before that, I'm going to explain some things about ancient hospitality. A visit to ancient Israel will quickly convince you that in this ancient land, hospitality must have been a matter of life and death. Traveling in the desert land could be 90 degrees in the shade, and often there is no shade. You can run out of water. The road you are walking on often has robbers who take advantage of vulnerable travelers. But there is one thing in this rugged country that works in your favor: hospitality. You can approach any of the residents in this ancient land for food, water, and shelter, and they will gladly provide it. This same kind of extreme hospitality has been the practice around the Middle East and much of Africa for thousands of years. Hospitality in this region of the world was considered a sacred obligation. One of the earliest incidents of hospitality recorded in the Bible is the one in which Abraham welcomed 3 complete strangers, quickly providing food. And without realizing that these strangers were actually heavenly visitors. And 2 of them were angels who were on their way to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And one was a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ, meaning before he was born on earth, he did appear from time to time in the Old Testament. And anyway, that appearance of Christ, he came because he wanted to let Abraham know about this judgment so he could intercede, and to also prophesy the birth of Isaac that would happen 1 year later. But the thing is, he just automatically saw these strangers who'd been walking out in the desert. He ran to get his wife to prepare food. He brought him water. He gave him shade to sit under, and they fixed a fancy meal and took care of all their needs. And this was a common thing to do that. And in Hebrews 13:2, it talks about how many people, it actually says to remember to be hospitable to strangers, because it says people have, without realizing it, entertained angels without knowing it. And this is a case where that happened. Abraham didn't know these were heavenly beings, angels, and being Christ himself. He just saw strangers that needed help and ran to make sure their needs were met. So this is how important hospitality was to these people. Anyway, and so when God told Abraham that he was going to have to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah because they were so wicked and they were doing so many bad things and judgment had to come down on them, Abraham was concerned about his nephew and his family who lived in Sodom. So he prayed for God to not destroy it if he could find righteous people living there. He asked for a certain number of righteous people there, that God would not destroy the whole city for their sake. And he kept going, and finally he narrowed it down to 10 righteous people, and God agreed not to destroy it for their sake. But God could not even find 10 righteous people there. So the best thing he could do is to protect Lot and his family by removing them from the city. So basically he was instructing the angels, before they destroy it, to help Lot and his family get out of the city. Mm-hmm. So they wouldn't be destroyed. And so anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read basically, I can't read all the verses, but I'm going to read quite a bit about the actual story of what happened in Sodom. when those heavenly visitors, see, they appeared like a couple of men. And so I'm going to read the story, and then we're going to talk about that a little bit. Okay, this is Genesis 19, 1 through 17. Now I gotta find it again. Okay, here it is. All right. Okay, so first, 1 through 17. Gotta get on the right page. Okay. And there came 2 angels to Sodom at evening. And Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them. And he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, Behold now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and you shall rise up early and go on your ways. And they said, No, but we will abide in the street all night. And he pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in unto him and entered into his house. And he made them a feast, and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. And they called unto Lot, and said unto him, Where are the men which came in to you this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. And that was a euphemism. Basically, they wanted to rape them. And I'm going to say that these people didn't just rape men, they raped everybody. Mm-hmm. But these 2 men were the guests of Lot, and he felt really obligated to protect them at any cost. So you'll see what happens here. Find it right. Okay. I'm going to read through 17. Okay. And Lot went out at the door unto them, and shut the door after him, and said, I pray you, brethren, do not do so wickedly. Behold, now I have 2 daughters which have not known man. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and do to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing. Now, first of all, he's good about the hospitality, but there's a few other things he's missing.
If only he'd be more hospitable to his daughters, too.
Right. But see, they weren't as valuable, but the guests, you have to take care. Because then after he said, don't do anything to them, he says, for therefore they came under the shadow of my roof. So he felt in every way he needed to protect them. And see, he didn't even realize these were actually angels. Mm-hmm. But he was just trying to make sure he took care of his guests. And they said, stand back. And they said again, this one fellow came in to sojourn, and he will needs be a judge now. We will deal worse with thee than with them. So they're talking about Lot now. He was a newcomer in Sodom. He came to live there, and because he sat in the gate where he saw those angels coming into town, that meant that he was one of their judges, the city judge. So that's why they say some of this stuff that they say here. It says, this one fellow came in to sojourn, and he will needs be a judge. Now will we deal worse with thee than with them. And they pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break the door. But the men, meaning the angels, put forth their hand and pulled Lot into the house to them, and shut the door. And they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. So they couldn't see anymore. I wonder if at this point Lot realized these were angels and not just mere men.
Probably.
Because he was able to strike them blind. And the men said unto Lot, hast thou here any besides? Oh, the men, the angels said this, not the men at the door, okay? Have you any here beside son-in-law, and thy sons, and thy daughters, and whatsoever thou hast in the city, bring them out of this place. For we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxing great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has set us to destroy it. And Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law. So they just thought he was joking. And when the morning arose, then the angels hastened Lot, saying, Arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters, which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters, and the Lord being merciful unto him. And they brought him forth and set him without the city. And it came to pass, when they had brought them forth abroad, that he said, Escape for thy life, look not behind you, neither stay thou in all the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. So, the angels helped them escape. But let's talk a little bit more about the fact that Lot, he did the right thing being hospitable. And he apparently was more righteous than most of the people there in that city, but that must not be saying much. Because look what little respect he had for his own daughters. And if you read the rest of the story later, you'll find out that they had no respect for him either. Because they didn't, he didn't, even try to protect them. And later on, there were some things they did that if you ever study that whole passage, you'll see what happens. But anyway, so that shows right there that the women were not valued. And it also shows that what was going on there was these men just basically just wanted to be mean and rape and do everything they could to the men or the women, but they targeted the men and Lot because they knew Lot was trying to protect these visitors with his own life. And so they targeted that, since hospitality was so important. And the thing is, the people of Sodom, they were not hospitable to people the way they were supposed to be. And so anyway, and then I'm going to read 24 and 25 here. Let's see, where's that at? Okay. It says, and he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities and that which grew upon the ground. And then later it says, and Abraham got up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord, and he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the plain, and behold, and lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. So, it did get destroyed, but there is a popular belief, and you'll hear this again and again, that the sin of Sodom was homosexuality. And it didn't look like those men wanted to have a sexual partner, that they were just gay and had another partner they wanted to have sex with. It doesn't sound like that to me. And The Bible actually tells what the sin of Sodom was, but you will hear over and over by preachers and many, many people that will say, well, that was the sin of Sodom. And it was the abomination of Sodom, and it was the evil, and that's why that Sodom was destroyed, because they were homosexuals. Well, there's a scripture in Ezekiel that tells exactly what the sin of Sodom really was. And so I'm going to read that as well. It's Ezekiel 16, 49 through 50. So I have to look that up now. I don't have very many scriptures, but these were the important ones that I needed to read. Because we barely mentioned this stuff before, but it's good to see exactly what the Bible really says and find out why people say what they say about it all, and why they mislead people and condemn people, and they got their own ideas of what this was all about. Okay, Ezekiel 16, 49 and 50. So that's just 2 verses, and so I just have to find it first. Okay, here it is. It says, behold, this was the iniquity of your sister Sodom. Pride, fullness of bread, and abundance of idleness was in her and in her daughters. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and needy. And they were haughty and committed abomination before me. Therefore I took them away as I saw good. Basically, if you read this in a more modern translation, it was because they weren't helping the poor. They weren't showing hospitality to travelers who came into the city. And so I studied the history of what really happened there. And here was a big part of the problem. Instead of practicing hospitality, like they all knew they needed to do in that kind of land, when people would come in, travelers would come into that city, they wouldn't feed them, they wouldn't give them water, they wouldn't do anything. They just left them out in the street to die. And they did that again and again and again. They did not care. They did not take care of the poor. And it says right here, that was a lot of their problem. They were proud and they didn't want to help the needy. And basically, they had what they needed. They were abundant, but they wouldn't share anything with strangers. They wouldn't share it with anybody. They just didn't care. And they left people out there destitute and not able to take care of themselves. So this is part of why they were mocking Lot for even trying to protect those strangers, because they were ready to abuse them. And of course, they didn't know they were angels either until they struck them blind. So I don't know. It's like it's so clear what the real problem was here. And yet people pick on the fact that they said they wanted basically to have sex with these men. That's not the same thing as a homosexual couple. Mm-hmm. Because what that is, that's gang rape. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like they would have been willing to do it, with men or women, because that's why Lot even offered his daughters, because there are other stories, too, where people did that, and they ended up raping and killing the women. And there's other stories recorded in the Bible of those kind of things, and they didn't think anything of it. In that case, too, the people were trying to protect their guests and just push the women out the door so these people could abuse them. So it's not uncommon for that kind of thing to take place. But see how this is totally different than the way it's portrayed.
Yeah, and here's what always got to me is that Lot acted like it would be less bad for them to rape his daughters than to rape his guests. And
right.
It's weird. First of all, nobody should be raping anyone. But
exactly.
But here's the thing: because women were so undervalued, and because I guess were even more important than the family. It's really weird.
Yeah,
but,
see, that's the priorities are a little screwed up there. I mean, I do believe we need to be more hospitable, but in that land they knew it for sure because it was a matter of life and death.
Yeah, unfortunately, the way some Christians have tried to interpret this is that, well, it's better to rape women than to rape men. Therefore, they're trying to act like that rape is okay as long as it's heterosexual. That's the implication of the way Christians are teaching this
and none
story.
of that's okay at all.
Yeah, how about none of it's okay? I'm going to leave it at that.
Rape is a violent act.
Yeah.
It's not even a sexual act, really. And though no biblical text explicitly connects same-sex behavior to the sin of Sodom, it was Augustine, a 5th century theologian, who fixed the popular connection between the sin of Sodom and same-sex behavior. In referring to the men of Sodom, he criticized those who took the passive role, writing that they were corrupt and pervert their own nature by becoming inflamed with passion to make unnatural of the thing God does not allow. Notice that it bothers him that those in the female role in a homosexual act, like, the more passive partner of two men, how those in the female role in homosexual acts is that bothers him more than the act of rape itself, because he had definitely had hang-ups about women, and I could write a whole book just about Augustine, I've read about his history and all his hang-ups, and then people for years have gotten weird ideas from him because he's considered like the father of Western theology. No wonder Western theology is so screwed up, because this guy had big problems, and he had hang-ups about sex, and he blamed women for sin coming into the world. I mean, totally blamed women for it, and that women caused every bad thing by trying to get men to have sex with her. And so, you see, he had a lot of problems. So anyway, he also introduced to the church the imperative that sex, in order for it to be moral, had to be procreative. So that's another thing people get hung up on, of why homosexuality is bad, because you can't procreate. Some people can't anyway, even if they're heterosexual. And so, but he's saying it's all bad unless you can have children. The word sodomy was invented later to refer to anal sex based on the name of the city of Sodom, because it was to be the, quote, sin of Sodom, which was assumed to be the cause of its judgment and destruction. So this was a very important thing we needed to cover, because this is one of the main things people will bring up about how bad a homosexual is, because that was the sin of Sodom. So you're evil. So let's say that, now some people believe that, it's okay if you were born with same-sex attractions, but they don't believe in actually doing it, and it's okay if some people believe that. But the problem with that is people have, biological reasons why they have those same-sex attractions, which we're going to get into more about that too, in the scientific side of it, what they're finding out. But see, so then they grow up thinking, ooh, I'm really bad, and they haven't even had a chance to choose what they're going to do about anything. But then people are going to say, oh, you don't dare be gay because that was the sin of Sodom, you wicked thing. This is something you're going to run into so much, and you're going to hear a lot about it during Pride Month. because people are going to condemn everybody and lump them all together, all the alphabet people together, that acronym, and say they're all just bad. And basically, there's a lot of differences between some of the different categories anyway. But to just say, well, it says right here in the Bible that this was the sin of Sodom, it does not say that in the Bible. And it's all taking things out of context and interpreting them your own way, and one person after another through history making assumptions, or with their own hang-ups starting to teach people what's right or what's wrong, or what's good, what's bad, and picking out verses out of the Bible to use as a weapon against other people. This is something people need to know. People in the LGBT community need to know it and be aware of it. And people, the allies, people in society in general need to watch out for their own attitudes toward people. Things they don't understand or know about. I don't know why people can't just say, I don't know much about this and I don't understand it, but maybe there's some things I need to learn. Yes, it takes us all time to learn about new things that we don't understand. But why immediately say, oh, they must be bad. See, that's something we got to really watch out for. So I felt like this was very important that we cover these things in Genesis, and I'm planning on going through all the verses in the Bible that that people point to. It may take us time to do that, and God may have us detour a little bit into some other things, like we're trying to study more about the biological side of it to help people understand that. But we felt like we were supposed to keep working on this all the way through Pride Month, and I have no idea how long it's really going to go, because it just seems like the thing people need to hear about. So, now, do you have any more to say?
Yeah, well, first of all, there's no evidence in that story that anyone was actually experiencing a homosexual orientation.
Right.
Because it was gang rape they were trying to do. It was an act of violence.
They were just being abusive.
To humiliate, Lot and his guests by doing that to them. And it had nothing to do with people today who were just considered sinful without doing anything. At least those people were doing something wrong, and so they were considered sinful, whereas other people like me just work at Walmart. I'm a sinner, so there's that.
Yeah, see, that's just it. Some people aren't doing anything wrong, but people just assume they're just a terrible sinner because they're different in some way that they don't understand.
Yeah.
And so that gets into all kinds of things, but that's why we really feel like we need to help clarify. There's so many new things being learned and understood about the biological side of these things that were not understood for years and years. And so we're glad that we're learning more about it, and we just need to be made aware that some of these conditions people have, they can't help it the way they were born, and there's reasons for it. And a lot of times people look at somebody different and say, well, they just want to be bad because they're acting like that. And like transgender people, and we've talked a lot, what people don't understand is how common intersex conditions are, and there's many different types. Mm-hmm. And those can influence all of this. And so we just need to learn to love people as people and understand that there's things we don't understand yet, but we want to learn. And we want to be helpful and loving to everybody. And so that is the main message, and that's what I felt like we needed to talk about. And so this episode was pretty much about, the attitudes toward gender in the book of Exodus, and we'll just continue to talk about what God wants us to talk about through all this and get us through Pride Month, and who knows, I don't know how long God's going to have us really working on this specific thing, but it seems like it's really needed.
Mm-hmm.
So, is that it?
I guess that's it. I'm just glad that we did it because people are going to bring up this story
Oh, yeah.
as if it's some kind of example when
Yeah,
it really
right.
isn't.
That was the sin of Sodom. That was the sin of Sodom. And we're going to get more into that word abomination again, too, because I brought that, and I've heard that so many times. That was the abomination of Sodom. And find out, what does the word abomination really mean?
I look forward to that one because
Yeah.
here's the thing now. I don't know what an abomination is, and you'll have to educate me on this.
Yeah.
But people just say that word because it sounds like a nasty word, doesn't it? Abomination. It just sounds nasty.
Sounds like somebody came and tried to bomb the nation.
That's exactly what it sounds like. I'm going to bomb abomination.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, and people get in the habit of saying that and they don't even know what it means. And it's mentioned a lot in the Old Testament, especially. That word is used, but we're going to find out how often it's used and over so many different things. And it doesn't mean that it's a worse sin than anything else, everything else around it, because that's one of the scriptures too. Even in the New Testament said that one sin isn't any worse than another. If you've committed one sin, you're guilty of all. So how could one sin be any worse than another? Even if you do think something's a sin, don't say, well, that's the worst sin of all because that's an abomination. No, there could be all kinds of interesting abominations.
Well, and then that gets into the whole thing of what is sin. Because the rabbit hole goes deep.
So define sin too. Yeah, people have to think, they have to listen, they have to pray, they have to seek God, they have to ask God for wisdom, so they know exactly what they are talking about and what they're even thinking about, and what they're assuming about the world and about people, and find out what God's really called us to do. And not just get caught up in all these things we hear from different sources about how bad a certain group of people are without really understanding much about it. So I believe that this was what we were supposed to do today, and so I hope that it helps people, to comfort people who have been condemned by these things, and to help enlighten people that just need to know and understand. So, I guess that's it.
Yep.
So, God bless you, and we're glad to be back and to continue our episodes. We just got interrupted for a while, but we're glad to be able to pick up and continue now. We had, for 3 weeks we weren't able to do it because we had different things come up in a row. So, we're happy to get back to it, though, and we haven't forgotten you out there, and we haven't forgotten this topic, and we're going to just keep doing what God wants us to do. So, see you on the next one.
Okay.
Yes,